This is Globalization Review Part 2, page 1. Alright, beginning with World War I. And again, this is the unit that I was not here for. It was also the unit where you had all the snow days. So it kind of got a little discombobulated. So let's go through these causes really well. What caused not World War I in Europe to start in 1914, but us to enter World War I in 1917? So what caused our involvement? Kyle?
Zimmerman note.
Very good. The Zimmerman note. And what was that?
That was a note that was sent from Germany to Mexico asking for an alliance so that they could retake the Mexican settlement.
Very good. Yes. The U.S. intercepted a telegram from Germany to Mexico, encouraging Mexico to enter an alliance with them. They'd help Mexico win back, California, Arizona, New Mexico. Mexico did not accept that offer, but that was a direct threat to our country. Okay, another cause then.
The German U-boats on the American warships.
Very good. Yes, the unrestricted submarine warfare by the U-boats attacking American ships, so our neutral rights at sea were being violated. Very similar to what got us into the War of 1812. What is the most famous example of the passenger ship that was shot down by a U-boat torpedo? The Lusitania. But be careful, the Lusitania is not why we entered World War I. Unrestricted submarine warfare is. Lusitania is an example, but it was a British passenger ship. Americans did die on it, but it happens in 1914, and we don't get involved in the war till 1917. Lusitania. So it's an example, but it's not like a direct cause for why we get into the war. After that, there are going to be some merchant ships attacked, and finally Kaiser Wilhelm made the Sussex Pledge, S-U-S-S-E-X, and he said that he would no longer attack our ships. And then he broke that in 1917. So he broke the Sussex Pledge because he figured, hey, before America could ever mobilize and get troops and supplies over here, I could possibly win and conclude the war. So it was worth it to him to break this pledge and risk having us enter the war. All right. And then democracy and peace. Okay. What was Wilson's diplomacy called again? Anybody remember? Moral diplomacy. And this played into him seeing that it's America's role to expand democracy in the world. And he sees this as an opportunity to save democracy, expand democracy. He also called this a war to end all wars. So he thought it would bring about a lasting peace. Now, keep in mind, when the U.S. declared war, and in the years leading up to our involvement, the American public was divided over who to support. You might just want to write this on the side. At the beginning of the war, it's not like everybody was anti-Germany, anti-Kaiser Wilhelm. It went along ethnic lines. Okay? But as time went on, our business community was a lot closer to Britain and France. Plus, we were getting a lot of propaganda just from Britain. So it does push us more in the direction of the Allied as opposed to the Central Powers. All right, now, how did all of this affect the home front? We had the War Industries Board. This was led by Bernard Baruch. B-A-R-U-C-H. Baruch. And it did not have nearly the economic power that the War Industries Board or the War Production Board of World War II had. He oversaw things that we needed. He tried to gather raw materials, but it really was not as powerful as it looked on paper, or as powerful as the War Production Board during World War II. All right, you had the Committee on Public Information. Does anybody remember who headed up this committee? Anybody? Yes, George Creel. Very good. And what was the job of the Committee on Public Information? Anybody?
Was to send out advertisements and propagandas that people would support the American side.
Very good. Yes, it was to oversee propaganda and to encourage support for the war. So first, it kind of created the anti-German hysteria, but it also encouraged certain actions. So like it encouraged people to enlist. It encouraged people to buy Liberty bonds. It encouraged people to ration, things like that during the war effort.
Encourage communist what? Or like them not like communists?
Yeah, they're gonna definitely put out anti-communist literature as well, but anti-German was like the big thing. And remember, there's gonna be a lot of anti-German feelings. That's partly why the 18th Amendment was passed during this time. It was a way to conserve wheat for the war effort, but it was also a way to discriminate against German citizens. In Cincinnati, a lot of German streets were renamed. Our symphony stopped playing music by German composers. Some schools stopped teaching German as a language. Okay. All right, the Food and Fuel Administrations, and I have no idea why I put those arrows there, just right through them. We had Hoover, as in the future president, in charge of the Food Administration, and Harry Garfield was the Fuel Administration. Harry Garfield. You can remember it because Garfield's a cat and he's hairy. Thank you, everybody. Okay. So, and again, this is going to be what encourages voluntary actions on the part of Americans to ration food. So we had the heatless, meatless, wheatless days, Gospel of the Clean Plate. And this is also when Congress passed daylight savings time in an effort to save and conserve fuel. But the big thing to know is this is all voluntary. That this is not mandated like it was during World War II. All right, what civil liberty violations did we have during World War I?
First Amendment violations to freedom of speech.
Very good. Yes, we had limits on freedom of speech. You pretty much weren't allowed to criticize the draft, the government about the war. You couldn't interfere with the sale of Liberty bonds. And what were the acts that did this? Gage? Espionage Act and the Sedition Act. Not to be confused with the Alien Act and Sedition Act of the War of 1812, or prior to the War of 1812. So these said you couldn't interfere with the draft, you couldn't interfere with the sale of Liberty bonds, and they were used really to jail anybody who was criticizing the government. And they were upheld in a very important Supreme Court case for you to know. Schenck, it's S-C-H-E-N-C-K, versus the U.S. And in that case, the government says, in times of clear and present danger, the government can limit your rights. And by clear and present danger, they mean immediate and obvious. Okay? So in times of clear and present danger, they can limit your rights. Huh?
When we're taking the exam, are they going to take points off or not count, say like on the exams, like if we use Schenck versus US but we misspelled Schenck, are they going to count?
It depends how close it is. If it's like you just forgot the second C or something, they're probably going to count that as an outside
Like
term.
what if you, like, and say, if you use something like the Sherman Antitrust Act, like if you change the Sherman Antitrust law, would they count?
Oh, that would be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as you get close to the gist.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the World War I will only be in that war for about a year, okay, before there is a ceasefire, and we're going to have the conference to make the Treaty of Versailles. Wilson's going to go there with a plan for peace, referred to as Wilson's 14 points. Its ideas are going to be much different from what actually ends up in the Treaty of Versailles. And I know this is something you covered in World Studies. It's something you covered this year, so this should kind of be something that sticks with you. What were some of the ideas in Wilson's 14 points? Kyle?
League of Nations.
League of Nations. Very good. Another idea in Wilson's 14 points. Lowen?
Not declare like a person as a cause, well not person like the Nazis as all their fault.
Very good. Yeah, this really, it's more about peace than punishment. So we're very interested in kind of like forgiving and trying to move on. Okay? What else?
Self-determination.
Very good. Self-determination for all nations. So you're going to have all of those little countries that are made out of the territory that had been Russia, but Russia had given up to Germany. All those little territories will become little countries. Disarmament for everyone, not just Germany. Also, impartial adjustment of colonial claims. So everybody kind of was putting back the colonies the way they were before the war. And free and open seas, which obviously relates back to the reason we got involved in the situation. Okay. All right, now, what were some of the things that went into the Treaty of Versailles? What's really the only idea from Wilson's 14 points that ends up in the treaty? League of Nations. So we have a League of Nations, but you might want to write there that it's not very powerful, it can't enforce anything, so we're writing this under the Treaty of Versailles on that side. And we do not join it. We never ratify the Treaty of Versailles. All right, and other ideas that end up in the Treaty of Versailles, not from Wilson's 14 points, but just how it ends up. Very good. Germany had to pay very high reparations, which again leaves them economically depressed. Who had to take all the blame for the war? Germany. That's actually referred to as the War Guilt Clause. Germany had to take full responsibility for the war. Very good. Germany had to disarm, but nobody else really had to. Germany lost land. Also, the Soviet Union did, but they had already ceded that land to Germany in a treaty that ended the war between those two countries. Italy did not get all the land they wanted, which leaves them kind of feeling better. So in general, this was about punishment, not peace. Okay? But it was easy for Wilson in the United States to go in and say, oh, let's make nice. We didn't suffer all of the destruction that Europe had. All right, question, Kyle?
Didn't this also make the Rhineland a demilitarized zone?
Yes, they did demilitarize the Rhineland along their border with France. All right, now, maybe just at the top of World War I, if you do want to just recall real fast the overall causes of the war in Europe, just so you remember them, it's militarism, nationalism, imperialism, militarism, nationalism, imperialism, and alliances. Okay, that's really more world history, but it could help. All right, now this again leads us into this period of more isolationist foreign policy in the 1920s. What our goal in the 1920s was to remain isolationist. Okay, so I would put that under our goal. Summarize the goal, foreign policy in the 1920s. Did I have that? Don't I have that written down there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it was to remain isolationist, but we weren't completely isolationist. We did get involved in some treaties, some conferences, and things like that. But most of those treaties and conferences, what was our goal with most of those when we got involved? Our goal was to preserve our isolationism by... Let's talk about what some of those conferences are then. So what are some of the times when we did get involved with the rest of the world in the 1920s? Anybody remember any examples?
Economic conference.
That was in the early 1930s, and we didn't go. How about the Washington Conference, which was about disarmament, okay, limiting the number of naval ships. Countries were going to have there was going to be a ratio system for determining how many naval ships everybody had. The Kellogg-Briand Pact would be an example, and that basically outlawed offensive wars. And the Dawes Plan would be an example, which was a debt repayment plan for Germany, for Europe, and ultimately back to us. Now, why did we do some disarmament? Why did we come up with that economic plan? What was the goal? When we did get involved in foreign affairs, what was our goal? Anybody?
Keep us isolated.
Our goal is to keep us isolated by trying to maintain peace in the world. Because we were not going to be able to stay isolationist and stay out of foreign wars if we couldn't promote peace. So all those examples, the Washington Conference, the Kellogg-Briand Pact, the Dawes Plan, ultimately they're about preserving our isolationism by maintaining peace in the world.